3 years ago, I was going on vacation with my family and didn't have anything to upload for the next week. So I made a couple of compilations just to fill the gaps, and one of those compilations is now the 12th most popular video on my entire channel. And I guess you guys really like that topic. And I am making another one because today I uploaded my first ever Constructor loadout guide. And I don't know why I never covered it. I just didn't wanna. I thought constructors were simple, but I made a 21-minute video anyway, so that'll be included in today's video. So now that I made the constructor guide, I realized, well, I've got a completely up-to-date constructor guide. My ninja loadouts guide is updated. My soldier loadouts guide is updated. And okay, I'm gonna be real with you guys. The Outlander farming loadouts video, it's been over 3 years and Outlanders have just not changed enough. I'll have a little bit more to say on that in a second, but I want to make two disclaimers before this video goes on too long. This is a compilation. If you have seen all of those videos I just mentioned, then you don't need to watch this, although you could if you want to refresh some information, and timestamps are down below if you guys want to skip around. And the other thing is that these are the best hero class loadouts, meaning the best soldier loadout, so to speak. Maybe you're just buffing ARs and SMGs. The best constructor loadout is based on like defensive builds, making your walls thick and strong. Then ninja loadouts are mostly focused on swords and melee damage, and then the Outlander loadouts is focused on farming. There are lots of different ways to play the games. I've got all Ventures loadout seasons building up here. I've got one more that I need to add for playlists. If you guys are playing Ventures, that's where you want to get best loadouts for that. And I have an entire playlist of fun loadouts. This is my favorite series on the entire channel. These are all fun either because they're quirky and weird or because they're super overpowered. And there are over 150 and growing videos on this playlist. And if you want amazing loadouts for Save the World, it's pretty exhaustive. So today's focus is just soldiers, ninjas, constructors, and Outlanders, not necessarily in that order. Now, there are a couple of updates I want to make. Now, the only thing that has really changed are like the hero changes recently. There were 8 heroes that were changed sort of a little bit, and that makes it a little worth mentioning. So Cloak Shadow does a little bit of extra damage around him now when you kill an enemy with a melee. That's pretty strong. I'm actually gonna upload a Ventures loadout on that eventually. I have recorded it. I don't know when it's going live, and that's kind of nice to throw in support of ninjas. It doesn't change the whole scheme. I'm not gonna remake a whole video because of a minor support character that I don't even 100% recommend. He's just worth considering. Base MD is so much better now. It's 6 times more healing, and he is well represented in that constructor video, so 2 thumbs up for me. And finally, that farming build that I said hasn't changed much. Now, it really hasn't. It's still good, but 2 things have changed that I want to talk about. First and foremost, we got the new hero, Eternal Wanderer. She doubles your sprint stamina, so you can sprint for longer. That's kind of nice. You don't actually do that much sprinting in an intense farming loadout, so like Fleetfoot Ken is still fine. All the support heroes I recommended in my video that'll be in this one are still good. And the other thing I want to mention is that I have done some testing, and so long as you are spamming anti-material charge and you are farming basic resources like, you know, carved twine, resin, rough ore, oxy, stuff like that, then honestly, Southie and Clip perform identically. I made this video in the desert, and there's another one in the forest where I compared the results, and they were nearly identical performance in 10-minute farming tests. So that really shook my world. If you are a regular farmer spamming anti-material charge, in my old video, I recommend Clip like outright. She's a clear winner for the commander slot. I don't know if that's necessarily true. If you're focusing on more rare ores like Sunbeam, Bright Core, coal, for example, Clip might be a little better, but in a typical farming session, you're probably killing glowing animals and recycling those weapons and traps. You're doing storm chests, target practice, you're recycling those weapons and traps. You're doing crystal encampments and anomalies, and all of these sources are really, really good sources for Sunbeam, Bright Core, the rare stuff, quartz, you know what I mean? So if you're using Clip for that, it can make some sense, but in general, I would nowadays put a little bit more of an emphasis on Southie. However, the loadouts I recommended in this video are the same. It hasn't changed basically at all in over 3 years. So yeah, I'm gonna leave that video in this one here today. Again, this is a compilation, so this is just a nice one big video for all 4 of the hero classes. So I think that just about covers all the little asterisks I want to throw in there. So without further ado, enjoy. All right, this is it. My best constructor loadout video. I've pushed back on this topic for years, but I get the question constantly, so I'm breaking it down for you guys. What you're seeing on screen is kind of a template loadout. This can change in a lot of different ways. So I want to say what this video is, who we're going to talk about, and the timestamps down below are there to skip around if you need it. First and foremost, this video is focused on defense. If you're running a constructor with a loadout that I'm showing you today, you are placing your base down on the objective, on the defense, and you are making your walls thick and you're keeping the enemies away. That's the idea. There are a lot of very, very strong constructors in the game, and there are some really fun offensive builds. I'm going to link my top 10 constructors you need video in the description down below. That video is kind of a precursor to this one. If you've seen that video and you have all 10 of those constructors, you are ready to watch this video. And even if you've seen that video and you haven't kept up with the news, you should know that since all of my constructor videos have gone live, something changed. Warden Kyle got buffed. We'll talk about him later, but he is 6 times better than he used to be for healing, and they added energy generation. He is an S tier support character for sure. He's going to come back up, but I'm going to get back onto the focus here. There are some offensive constructor builds in the game that are really good for doing launcher damage. You know, did you know that Demolitionist Penny is the only hero in the game that directly, specifically buffs rocket launchers? You can buff rocket launchers with a lot of different heroes, but she's the only one that specifically buffs rocket launchers. And she's a constructor, and there are a lot of really fun constructor builds with like decoy spam, and there are some exceptions with like Dennis Jr. where we're not going to be using him in today's builds, but he does give you the team perk totally rocking out, and that's insane. All of that is covered in the top 10 constructor video, link down below. I'll have some other links to offensive constructor loadouts if you are more focused on doing damage. So today we're going to be talking about defending builds. Now, if you are going to be building a defense, you need to understand something. First and foremost, use the correct element builds, okay? So if you are in a fire zone, it will do double damage to wood. Enemies that are fire do double damage to wood. Enemies that are water do double damage to brick, and enemies that are nature do double damage to metal. So long as you know that, you can then use the proper build for each mission. There are really only 2 builds you should use, and that's brick or metal. As I'm currently recording this, we are in a fire season, so most 4X missions are fire element. Just use metal in that case. If it's a water mission, don't use brick, use metal. And if you are in a water mission that has metal corrosion, still use metal, because metal corrosion is one of the most confused modifiers in the game. Basic husk melee attacks cause metal buildings to corrode. That does not include smashers, that does not include the mini boss, that does not include mist monsters. That is basic targets. So we're talking about regular zombies, small zombies, you know, fat huskies that might get through your defense. If you're trapping properly, those enemies should pretty much never be hitting your base, and especially if you're using the right loadout, today's topic, you should not be having normal enemies getting to your base. So if you need help making trap tunnels, I have an entire playlist on trap guides. I know these videos are a couple years old, but I haven't made new ones because I just don't think it's necessary. This is my series talking you through how to build certain objectives, and pretty much every mission is different. You need to be fluid about it, but this teaches you the fundamentals. So if you've watched through this series and you have a basic grasp on how traps work, you know that tire traps are directional, floor frees are directional, and oh goodness gracious, the cannonballs bounce, people. Broadsides, they bounce. When you shoot a broadside off into nothing, it's not doing anything. It needs to bounce between a wall or 2. All right, so you need to place the broadside and have a wall 1 tile apart, or 2. You can get away with 3, but ideally 2 or 1 tiles apart. In a perfect scenario, you've got 2 broadsides facing each other, because the cannonballs bounce. All right, the cannonballs bounce, people. So as long as you know how traps work and you're using the right element build, the only exception would be like a water metal corrosion mission. That's an exception to that rule, where you are not wanting to build out of brick, but you might be scared of metal corrosion. I really think you should only use brick or metal. You can max out wood if you really know what you're doing in certain configurations. It does make some sense sometimes, but metal and brick are pretty much your main defense options. So this is a defensive guide. Now you know how to trap properly and you know which elements to use. All of those links are in the description down below. Let's talk team perks. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is right here because I've already got it used. Supercharged traps. That is unlocked through Mega Base Kyle. He is a base game hero, but he is a mythic. So the only 2 ways to get him are from llamas. Coincidentally enough, I'm recording this on a day with superhero llamas available. If you are lucky, you might get Mega Base Kyle from here. 1,000 extra tickets is cheap for that. I do believe he can be in regular llamas, although it is excruciatingly rare. And the normal way to unlock him is through the collection book, researching him. This is really expensive. I do not think this is worth it. Supercharged Traps is awesome. We'll talk about that in a second. And Mega Base has a great bonus, which we'll also talk about in a second. But all the other constructors I'm talking about today are also excellent, and you really don't need Mega Base. So I really don't recommend spending 5 weeks worth of flux on this character. You'll do just fine without him. But if someday he's in your llamas and you get lucky and you end up with a copy of Mega Base Kyle, he's great to have because he extends the base range by 1, which does not sound like a lot, but I promise it is, because that's not just like one direction. That's the whole perimeter gets extended by 1. Every trap that is affected by that will be doing more damage if he uses Team Perk, which is Supercharged Traps, and every wall in that range will be buffed by every other constructor you're using. It's really nice to have. 3 tiles in the lead is nuts. He will blanket an area. It's really, really good. We use him in Frostnite a lot as well. And Supercharged Traps, as mentioned, I got a buggy game here. Okay, switch to BR back. Supercharged Traps increases trap damage by 8.5% for every constructor in support. Now, that is a 42.5% damage bonus. That is so good. That is a lot of extra damage. When traps unbuffed are already plenty strong, this is a super good defensive, offensive build if you want your traps to do a lot of damage. I have a whole series on that. Link to those down below where I use Supercharged Traps. It's a pretty fun build. Now, if you are playing more normally, you're probably using Recycling. I believe this is available as soon as you have the game. I don't think there's any hero necessary. Basically, your base will just generate materials. It's it. You just, whatever you're used, metal, brick, or wood, you'll just generate those builds. Now, you're not usually going to make a profit. If you're somebody who has set up their Storm Shield defense to have a whole recycling chamber, then you're good forever. But this is a good resource in ventures or whatever. But honestly speaking, farming is really easy. I don't think you ever need recycling, although even that being as it may, you still might just want to use recycling anyway, because you're hanging out by the defense. You're probably building the traps and the walls, and you're not running around farming in those games, so getting a little back is nice. I actually run recycling in super easy missions. If I'm running a low-level mission to get V-Bucks, say, I will just use recycling, because I might as well get that wood back, or if my teammates build, they can just steal my recycling. I don't care. That's a really good perk to use for those use cases. Now, those are like the only 2 perks that you would normally use. The third one is another kind of offensive build, and that is Boom Base. That'll increase everybody's damage and crit rating by a small amount. It's nice to have. It's not incredibly strong, but sometimes it's fun to play with. If you need to activate it though, you do need to use rad heroes. So Battle Beat, super nice. If you get 10 eliminations in 9 seconds, she'll increase your damage and melee attack speed. That's a super nice perk to have. And then you kind of need to make a compromise, because you can't use Fumble. Sub wafers can be kind of good if you want to go get some sub wafers, or if you just want easy stats, then I recommend Sid here. He's just a hero that exists. You get him from the campaign, and then you got Boom Base active. That can be a pretty decent team perk if you want to do a little bit of extra damage. Now, the other 2 that I'm going to recommend are a little more specific. Totally Rocking Out, as mentioned earlier, you get that through Dennis Jr., who, as I am currently recording, is available in the event shop. Now, I'm going to recommend the timeline description down below. This is a really good resource for knowing when stuff comes around. I'm recording this in the June to August event here, so if you're out of season, you might have to voucher him. But if you've unlocked him and you have Totally Rocking Out, that can be really good to make your weapons do a lot more damage. And the other one, if you're a regular player, you probably know where this is going. Blast from the Past. Because you are running a defensive build and you're building a base that is just a defense, staying alive is really good. Archer regularly uses Constructor in our Frostnite runs, and when you're eventually challenging power level 500 husks, having triple health is kind of a big deal, and you can make that even more effective by having Prehistoric Iza and support, also available this season. Making your armor a lot higher can go a long way, and then we're going to swap out Battle Beat for anybody else. The only hero that really makes sense is Vigor. She is super weak. She does not heal you by a lot, but it is something. But if you want to just activate the team perk, she will get the job done, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to leave this back to Recycling because I feel like that's the most basic Constructor team perk you could use, and I want to fill out the rest from there. So now that we've talked about the different team perks, let's talk about possible commanders. Now, I'm kind of going to gloss over Mega Base Kyle because we already talked about him, but he increases the range. That's an immediate upgrade. I really like that, whether he's in the lead or support. Now, I need to say this right now before we move on with the commanders. Every single commander I'm about to mention works excellent in support. It's why I didn't want to make this video forever, because whatever commander you use from like the top 5 best ones, they will be your support, and then the loadout is basically the same 6 jumbled characters. So we're going to talk about a lot of the same characters today. I'm only going to mention like 9 or so, but Mega Base in the lead or support, super good option. The other, my personal favorite lead, is Base Kyle. He makes your builds have more health. Do I need to repeat that for anybody in the back? He makes your builds have more health. It's as simple as that. In support, it's 28%. In the lead, it's 84%. That is a lot. In the end game, metal can get up to like 9,000 HP or more. I don't actually know the exact value. I don't pay attention to that stuff, but you can make them dummy thick with Base Kyle in the lead. In fact, it's strong enough to stop a smasher twice. That's a big deal. Power level 250 smashers hit like a truck, and he will stop them. Now, the community's most favorite commander in the game is Ice King. He will take that, and 13,000 dummy thick. Somebody in chat said that. If you ever want to watch these videos live, by the way, Twitch link down below. Ice King is the community's favorite commander, and I see why. He will not make your walls much stronger, although I will say every base gives your walls 60 armor. You can see it down there. Kind of an interesting thing. Most people don't think about that, but every base will make your build stronger. Meaning, even if you're using like Demo Penny with rocket launchers, for example, and you're focused on doing damage with your weapon, you might still want to put your base down. It's still going to help. And I don't know if bases stack. I think if a piece of builds is covered by a base, it's going to have 60 armor no matter how many bases are touching it, but commander perks will stack. So if somebody is running Mega Base Kyle, it'll have that nice wide range. If somebody comes behind him and puts down Base Kyle in the lead, you'll have much stronger walls, and that range will still be a thing. And you can have super strong walls that freeze enemies. That's what Ice King does. He will freeze enemies for 4 seconds. That is a really, really nice perk, because even if a smasher crashes through your wall and breaks it, he will be frozen in place for 4 seconds. That might not sound like a lot, but that is plenty of time to at least address the situation, turn around, go to that smasher, shoot him for 4 more seconds. It's a really big deal, and that is a really, really nice perk. So a lot of enemies, if they are not strong like a smasher, might just smack your wall, get frozen for 4 seconds, and then get back to it. And there's a 15-second cooldown on that, but that just slows down every single enemy. They get 1 free hit, and then they're frozen for 4 seconds. That's a big deal. I can understand why people really like Ice King, and even in support, and the commander slide at least, even in support, he's slowing enemies down. When enemies are walking 15% slower on your builds, they're effectively getting hit by your traps for 15% longer. They're taking 15% longer to go through your builds. If you have a 6-tile long build, and you have Ice King in support, it might as well be a 7-tile long build. So that's just a nice passive bonus, and it's why Ice King is always in support, and that's one of those really good bonuses that can be affected by Mega Base Kyle, because he can stretch that floor out by just 1 more tile, which might not sound like it matters, but it makes a difference. Now, the last primary commander that I think is relevant to every single mission type is Power Base Nox. Mine is not leveled up because I'm a founder, and I might as well use Power Base Penny, but it's identical. Power Base Nox is available in regular missions. He is excellent. He heals your builds by 11% every 10 seconds, which, as I said, with maxed out metal, that's a couple thousand plus HP every 10 seconds passively, which is really, really good. In support, it's 4%, which is less good, but still nice to have. So in my example earlier, if you've got a Base Kyle buffing your builds, Power Base will heal 11% of the total health, which means Power Base is actually better if you're using one person Power Base, the other person Base Kyle, and if somebody else, if a third person is using Ice King, nothing's getting through that wall. If you got teamwork going on, that is a buffed build. So like I said earlier, every single one of these heroes is an excellent support. You just pick whichever one works for you in the commander slot. Statistically, the answer is Ice King or Base Kyle. Understandably, Personally, I like Mega Base, but it's whatever. It's all preference. The other 3 should be in support. Now, those work for every mission type. At any power level, especially the end game, this might not be necessary in like Plankerton, for example, because usually your weapons should be a little overpowered by then. Ventures is also great because you don't require certain weapons. You just throw on the hero loadout and go. But there is one more hero that really only applies to Endurance or Ventures, and that's Machinist Harper. I don't play Endurance, so I don't use this character a lot, but increasing your trap durability by a ridiculous amount, and it's a global buff, by the way, not just under her base, but I mean the entire map every trap has a 52.5% trap durability increase. That's a really good perk for endurance when you need your traps to last. I also say Ventures because Ventures does not take into account your survivor squads. So plenty of people have Machinist Harper built in. They just have trap durability survivors buffing their trap durability. And that's a really good bonus to have in your set bonuses. But when it's ignored in Ventures, you might need to address that situation. Now I say might because it's really not strictly necessary. I have pretty much never used Machinist Harper in Ventures, but if you find that your traps are breaking, consider throwing her in the lead or support. On that note, if you're using a regular build that is focused on weapon damage, you don't need to be a constructor. You can just put her in support for any loadout. If you're running around farming and you want your traps to do the job, she will increase their trap durability regardless. Now, that was a ridiculous amount of information. So before we move on to the support perks, let me just show you what this looks like when everything is said and done. Like I said, I like Mega Base, so he's staying in the commander slot. If you have all the heroes I mentioned, Base Cal should be in support, Frozen Castle should be in support, and then I skipped out on Blast in the Past, so we're just going to make sure that Power Base is in support. Again, Power Base Nox is what you'd want to use, and I'm going to leave him here just so the icon doesn't get confused by new players. You know, my Power Base Penny Flex is always there in spirit. And this is pretty much what a normal build can look like. And then there are some other support characters that we'll talk about in a second, but this is pretty much what it's starting to look like. You see what I mean? Every Constructor loadout is the same 4 characters at least, and then you got like 2 open perks, maybe 1 considering that base MD is kind of insane. So if we're going to move on to the support characters, we might as well talk about what's going on. Warden Kyle just went from D tier to S tier. In fact, in preparation for this video, I was looking at my own Constructor tier list, and this is a really great resource, but Warden Kyle used to be D tier in my opinion. And honestly, I stand by that. But they made his healing bonus 6 times stronger, and he gives you energy, which is so good. That means everybody standing on or around the base, this is new too, the effect continues for 3 seconds even when you're not standing on the build. So if you've got a mega base commander with Warden Kyle in support, your team is going to be fully healed if they are anywhere near your base. It's so good. So your health will be fine, and then you'll be generating energy. So if anybody in the squad is spamming any kind of ability or melee heavy attack, they will be completely refilled. Or if it's a nature mission and those enemies are draining your energy and you need more, 2 energy per second is great. Again, I really don't think he's a commander. You could, if you need it, go for it, ignore me. But if you know what you're doing, you can make use of that. I really think he's a support character first and foremost, but obviously he can be good in commander. But we talked about the other options. You probably understand why I think that. Now, the second one I want to talk about is an interesting one, Thunder Thora. Now, she does better the lower level mission you're in. She will do next to nothing in the end game. 12.7 base energy damage every 5 seconds is not a lot at all, but it is completely passive. If you're a very high level player and you're AFKing like a V-Buck mission or something, she's great in support. In fact, if you're just AFKing a mission like that, you might put her in the lead. That could make sense too, but if you're putting her in the lead, maybe that can work in Ventures for a little bit. It's a good amount of damage, but it falls off heavily late game, so be careful getting comfortable with that strategy. It will not work forever. She's just a good hero to kind of have. Like I said, she's in my support kind of often just because I'm running lower level missions with base, and she helps a little bit, albeit not that much. And the exact same story goes for Electro Pulse Penny. She's kind of the same thing. When enemies smack your base, they take 15 base damage. It's not a lot. I even have like a little clip of that where I was watching her be useless in my Supercharged Traps video. Like, it is damage, but the enemy was healing itself faster than it barely did anything. So again, you could put her in the lead, but I don't know. I still think Thunder Thora is better. If you're AFKing a mission, you don't want the enemies to be smacking your base. You want them to just die by standing on it. So same story as always. If you put Penny in the lead or Thunder Thora in the lead, the other one will be in support, so it doesn't super matter, but she's a great support perk if you just want a little bit of extra damage. Speaking of a little bit of extra damage, Heavy Base Kyle. So Feel the Base is a little complicated, but let's read through it. Eliminating enemies standing on structures affected by the base will charge up the base to 30, and then it'll emit an explosion that knocks enemies back and deals damage. What that means is if enemies are standing on your glowing builds and you shoot them or kill them in any way, traps count of course, then it'll charge it up to 30, and once 30 enemies have died, it'll go brrr, and it'll do a bunch of damage. It's only a 3 tile radius, which is not that much, and 39 base damage is okay, but I have never noticed this. Every time I've paid attention to this perk, it was the same story as the other 2 gals. It just did not do a lot of damage. You can put him in the lead, but it still requires you to be killing enemies. So I just feel like you can do better. He's nice in support if you just want to fill out the squad and do a little bit of extra damage, but I can't seriously consider him a super viable option. So I'm just going to leave it at that, give you guys the information and go from there. And then the last one. Yeah, that's it. Last one I want to talk about is Bomb Squad Kyle. He has an armor bonus in there, so you take less damage. Again, do I need to say it again for anybody in the back? If you use Bomb Squad Kyle, you take less damage. It could not be more simple than that. Now, we can get complicated and explain how armor values work, but I don't wanna. It's a little bit of math, and you don't really need to worry about it. If you use him, you take less damage. If you're already using Blast from the Past and Prehistoric Isa, she will be better with your armor, you know, with your shield missing, her armor bonus is higher, and you really shouldn't use both, but you can, and you'll be fine. So, yeah, that's it. That's my Constructor loadout video. You now know all of the best commanders, you now know all of the best support characters, and if you are still missing anything I mentioned, then look through your inventory. Whatever makes sense, go ahead and use it. In fact, Eternal Wanderer is a brand new hero that just got added this season. She doubles your sprint stamina. A very simple hero again. She makes you run further. You might not be going very far as a Constructor, but you know what you're doing more than I do. Just scroll through your inventory, anything that makes sense. Fleet makes you run quicker. There are lots of different heroes in the game. There are heroes that buff Constructor abilities. Maybe you can throw in a Rosie bonus, you know, make your Rosie shoot a little faster. Like, there are lots of things you can look at and consider for yourself, but everything I just mentioned are my top recommendations for a base focused on defense. So there you go. It took people in my chat asking me for a Constructor loadout video about 400 times and many years of digging my heels in, but the recording is done. That is my guide. Comment down below if you guys liked it. You know, like the video if you liked it. Subscribe. These videos are conceptually harder to make than my normal recordings, and putting this together for you guys was kind of a fun time. So if you got anything out of this, a subscription would be nice, and I make lots of videos you guys might enjoy some more. So there's even a couple recommended here at the end in a second. So that's it. I'm out of here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your new loadout, and have a good time. Today, we're going to be discussing how to build the perfect soldier loadout. Note, soldiers are good for a lot of things. So today, we're going to be focusing on buffing assault weapons and SMGs. I already have a video for the best bow loadouts, which will involve Rabbit Raider Jonesy and Redline Ramirez, which are both soldiers. Then we've also got shotgun loadouts, which is covered by Buckshot Raptor, Shrapnel Headhunter. Those are both soldiers as well. And then there are abilities. I've got the minigun loadout, which is a super popular build. Lots of people like to use that. That is also covered in its own video. What I'm going to be doing today is focusing on soldiers' core strengths. The reason they start you off with Rescue Trooper Ramirez after the tutorial, just buffing ARs and SMGs. You can even see that this is built into the class perks. With Suppressive Fire, consecutive shots against the same target deal extra damage. With Stay Frosty, after 3 eliminations with your ranged weapons, you're increasing your weapon stability so you have less recoil. These soldiers in Save the World were designed to use a fully auto weapon over a sustained period of time, and the exceptions that I already mentioned will be linked in the description down below if you guys want to explore those topics. I also want to say, this is an updated video from a guide that I did not realize was so obsolete. If you birthed a child at the time that this video was recorded, they may be learning to speak now. This is so old. It's like 4.5 years old, this video. I have always stuck by that video because it recommended good soldiers. If you are somebody who just built a soldier loadout off of that old video, you probably got good suggestions, but that video predates Totally Rockin' Out, which is an extremely powerful team perk that I cannot ignore. So I also want to say one more final disclaimer on everything that I'm talking about here. This is not going to be an exhaustive list. There are a lot of soldiers in this game. There are a lot of different ways to play the game, and I am not going to be covering every single one of them. I mentioned I'm just going to be covering the basic ARs, SMGs, and everything that goes with it. I already have a substantial list of good support characters if you guys don't have some of the heroes I'm mentioning, and again, this is not exhaustive. If you want a complete video on talking about every single soldier in the game as of this video is posted, I'm going to post a tier list, linked in the description down below, where I discuss every single soldier, all of their perks, good and bad, and I literally rank them as I go. That's a really good resource if you're not sure about whether or not you should use a hero that you have. All right. super long outro out of the way, let's start with your basic Blast from the Past build. So there are several key leads that you want to consider. Rescue Trooper Ramirez is the most basic. She increases your assault damage and SMG damage by 50%. That's huge. She should always be in the lead or the support if you're going to be running either of those weapons. And the alternative to her in the commander slot is in the support right here, Tactical Assault Sledgehammer. He is the other best lead soldier. 225% extra crit damage is a lot. That is a ton. In most ARs with a single crit rating perk with a base crit chance of 10%, you are critting 38% of the time. With him in the lead, that works out to an effective 85.5% damage bonus. With Totally Rocking Out in the lead, it's way more because you're critting way more often, but that's decaying over a period of time, so it's kind of hard to nail down exactly how much he's giving you, but it's a lot. And these are the two heroes that you're going to be considering. If you're ever running an AR or an SMG, Sledgehammer should be in the lead or the support. Same with Ramirez. If one's in the lead, they just flip-flop, all right? That's going to be consistent in every single build. The other commander, the other of the big three, is Crackshot. Crackshot is unique in that he gives you the biggest damage bonus. You can see his perk is kind of long here, but it breaks down to every single time you fire a bullet, your damage goes up by 2.9%, and that's capped at 50. He caps at a 145% damage bonus. Unfortunately, that resets every time you reload, switch off your weapon for any reason. It does not reset when you're tactical sprinting, sliding, crouching, mantling, any of that. So you can get around the map pretty well nowadays. That's one of the key updates from my old video, but you do need to sustain that damage somehow. And if you have an LMG like the Hacksaw or the Terminator or the Mercury LMG, some weapon with a huge 100 round mag size, Crackshot is a great pick. If you have a ranged weapon with like a 50 plus round magazine, it can still be worth it to use Crackshot. If you're somebody who's comfortable shooting your weapon and not switching off until you're done shooting, Crackshot is an excellent lead, but I understand how that's not everybody's playstyle. The one king exception to this is the Scourge. This weapon is a hugely powerful assault weapon that never has to reload. So long as you don't let it overheat, which does count as a reload event in the game files, as long as you never let this overheat, it will continuously take advantage of Crackshot's commander perk, and I have a whole video on this, I'll link it down below, and a whole video on this after the new movement changes featuring how good it can be. Super strong combination, but I understand that's a mythic weapon. If you're watching this video, you're probably a new player and you don't have that. I'm just saying, in the end game, that's what you're looking forward to. Now, there is one final commander that I want to discuss regarding our topic at hand, and that is First Shot Rio. She is a little bit more niche, that's why I'm mentioning her last. Not always are you going to want to use her. If you're using a fully auto sustained fire weapon, she's not your girl. But if you're firing a weapon like the Hydra, the Rat King, or if you're using the Blackout AR from my Boom build, I'll link that down below. Strongest loadout I've ever seen. Not a soldier build, actually, but she makes those first 2 shots crit every single time, and in very specific use cases, she can be amazing. I'm not suggesting her as an all-around hero. You kind of need to know what you're doing or get a build suggested to you like this Rat King video down below. But in very specific circumstances, she can be good because your first 6 shots critting 100% of the time is amazing. With the Rat King or the Hydra, for example, if you're using a strong AR that does a ton of damage on a per bullet basis, she can go a long way. She doesn't fit into every build, but you should know she exists. Now that we got our main commanders out of the way, let's talk about team perks. I am going to disappoint many of you to say that there are pretty much only 2. This video is mostly going to be split in 2 parts, Blast from the Past and Totally Rocking Out, but I'm going to discuss a lot of information that correlates to both of these team perks, so try not to skip around even though the timestamps are there. Blast from the Past increases your health by 200% and removes your shields. You functionally have triple health with Blast from the Past, and the support perks are amazing. Prehistoric Isa gives you 33 armor. That effectively gives you a 30 your health on top of that. That's not exactly how it works, but it's good enough to know that if you use her in support, you'll die less often. Paleoluna and Jurassic Ken are pretty useless in this build. We're not using melees. We're not really focusing on our abilities as much. We're not using a lot of energy, so Sway and Focus doesn't really do much. And because we're not using much of our abilities, we don't need to worry about healing. The only other hero we can really talk about besides Rex Jonesy is Triceratops Ramirez. As I'm recording this, she is healing you a tiny amount over a way too long period. This is extremely slow healing. It takes like 4 minutes for her to heal you to full. It's functionally useless. The only hero that I can truly recommend that you should use besides Isa is Rex Jonesy, of course. He adds 3% of your current health to your damage. The easiest math for this is if you have 1,000,000 health, he'll add 30,000 damage. This has a 1 second cooldown. So you use it, it does 30,000, you wait a second, it does another 30,000, you know, it just adds the damage on top of your sustained fire. It's not a ton, but consider considering you're using Blast from the Past in this loadout example, you definitely want him there. And I said there's a lot of overlap because a lot of this build is going to be shared with Totally Rockin' Out. I just want to discuss the different team perks right here. So let's talk about Totally Rockin' Out. Totally Rockin' Out gives you a massive 160 crit rating, and it heals you every time it's activated. What I'm going to show you now is a nice little chart that will be linked in the description down below that correlates to how crit rating on the left here goes to crit chance on the right. It's not 1-to-1. So when you have a 160 crit rating, you're actually getting a 57% crit chance bonus. With that base 10% I was talking about earlier, if you had no crit rating perks, Totally Rockin' Out activating from the beginning would bring you from 10 to 67% chance to crit. When you're critting 2/3 of the time, Sledgehammer in the lead is an enormous damage bonus. It's a lot. However, because most weapons are running a crit rating perk, you're actually kind of getting a 190 crit rating. It's not that much extra. I still recommend crit rating with Totally Rockin' Out, by the way, because even though you're only really getting 2.5% extra crit chance, it does mean that you're going to be critting a lot more when Totally Rockin' Out isn't active, which is fairly often. If you don't trap accordingly or have wafers on hand, Totally Rockin' Out has a lot of downtime, so it's really good when you need it, but it's not always there. So I always recommend a crit rating perk, but that means that you'll typically have that 59.5% bonus, which is 0.5%, functionally 70% chance to crit. That is a ton of extra damage before we even talk about the support perks, which are awesome. So I'm going to put in the usual suspects, Battle Beat and then Fumble or Wafers here. Battle Beat is our favorite. She activates Rock and Riff. All of them activate Rock and Riff, I should say. That will increase your damage by 50%. So not only are we critting 70% of the time, but we're doing 50% damage on top of that. We're not using melees today, but boosting your melee attack speed by 32% is fantastic, and it's relevant in my Ninja Loadout build guide. Link to that video down below if you guys feel like running melees after this video. So she activates her perk. After 10 eliminations in 9 seconds, she'll activate Rock and Riff, and that's where the other support perks come in here. Sub Wafers is a support perk where if you harvest metal objects, you have a chance to get wafers. When you eat these wafers, you can activate Totally Rockin' Out on command, switch off to your weapon, and do tons of damage. That's a lot of maintenance. Sometimes I like to just run Fumble, where if you eliminate enemies, they have a 7% chance to drop a football, and then you just run over it and activate it. Both are completely fine. It depends on your playstyle, what weapon you're using, how you feel that day. When I'm showcasing these loadouts in videos, I like wafers so that I can just activate Totally Rockin' Out whenever, because it's really embarrassing to eliminate a crowd of enemies in front of you without the team perk active, and then you kill that 10th enemy, they're all dead, and then Battle Beat kicks in, and it's like, well, where was my team perk? So wafers can be really good for that use case, but Fumble's good if you're being a little lazy. Now, I do have one final suggestion regarding Totally Rockin' Out. If you are using Blast in the Past, you can use Sledge in the lead or Ramirez or Crackshot. It doesn't really matter. They have basically the same damage output. But if you are critting more often with Totally Rockin' Out, Sledgehammer is hugely better. It's not even a comparison anymore. He absolutely needs to be the commander if you're running Totally Rockin' Out. If you don't have him, you're fine. Okay, honestly, you can use Ramirez in the lead. You'll be good. I'm just saying if you have the option, if you eventually voucher him or get him from his event, timeline in the description if you guys want to see when he comes back, then, you know, just look forward to him. If you don't have him, you're fine. If you do have him, he's hugely better. I just want to make that clear. No stress. This build guide is meant to be for all players, so I got you all covered. All right. Now, as far as team perks are concerned, that's pretty much it. If you absolutely have none of these, Cool Customer is okay. Preemptive Strike is okay. Cool Customer's base game. Preemptive Strike comes from Raven for some reason. He just gives you that. So if you unlock that here, you get that. And from there, I'm going to let you guys figure it out. Just scroll through your team perks. Use whatever works. You don't absolutely need a team perk. I am somebody who's been sleeping in the end game for a lot of years now, so I like Totally Rockin' Out and I favor it heavily, but you will be fine. If you're power level 90 or less, or even 100 and whatever, you're going to be good. You don't need these specific team perks. These are just the best ones that you should strive for. I do have an entire video breaking down every single team perk in the game. It's completely up to date and will give you all the information that you need. Link to that down below. It's about half an hour, but it's timestamped so you can get all the information you want. Now that we've got Totally Rockin' Out covered, I want to take a step back and talk about Crackshot from earlier. With Totally Rockin' Out and Crackshot in the lead, you can make this insane build. You can put Battle Beat in support, you know, just activating Totally Rockin' Out, Fumble, because if we switch off to eat our wafers, it'll kill Crackshot's ability, and then all of these beautiful support perks. We got Sledgehammer from before, adding 75% crit crit damage to all of our shots. Then we've got Saurian Might from Rex Jonesy. That is because of a bug that I sort of want to talk about only because it's been in the game for a lot of years. Just like the Chromium Ramirez bug from the past video, that one got patched. This one might be patched as well, but it's been around for so long that I figured I'd talk about it. His perk of adding that extra health kind of applies twice for Battle Beat. It's a little complicated, but if you get a kill with Rex Jonesy active on it, it will count for 2 kills off of Battle Beat's elimination. That means that you can actually activate her ability with less than 10 eliminations. It's a little weird, but it kind of works, and I figured I'd mention it. If you don't want to take advantage of that and you just want to do some constant damage, the 17% from Rescue Trooper Ramirez is perfectly fine. This is how this build normally looks. And then there's Bulletstorm Jonesy. Bulletstorm Jonesy is an excellent support hero as well. I've talked about a lot of support heroes already, whether or not you noticed it. This build guide video is less focused on a singular loadout and more on the different recipes, but for Crackshot, there's only really one best way to go, and that's with Bulletstorm Jonesy in support. He has a perk very similar to Crackshot, where he stacks up your damage to 25% in support, which is less than 50, and then in the lead, he stacks up your damage by 2%, also capped at 25, so it's only 50, but he's increasing your fire rate. I don't value fire rate that much because you're just shooting faster and reloading more often, so you're not really sustaining a higher damage output. You will kill the enemies immediately quicker. That fire rate can be very satisfying, but you spend so much time reloading that it's not super versatile. And in this instance, where we're using Crackshot and like perhaps a Storm King Scourge, where we never have to reload, you're going to be overheating the weapon very fast, and that's no good either. So you get better use out of your bullets before you have to stop and reload or wait to cool down if you're using Bulletstorm in support, and that's where he kind of belongs in my opinion. But this is a very, very solid build you can make with Crackshot in the lead. Now that we've got our team perks figured out, I'm going to leave it on Totally Rockin' Out for now. We need to talk about support perks. I already talked about Sledge and all of our different commanders. All of our commanders work great in support for all the same reasons I just mentioned, but there are a lot of options. This was set up for Blast from the Past. If you are using Blast from the Past, Crossbones Barrett is the best support perk in the game, even if you're using Totally Rockin' Out. Coconuts are incredible. They basically give you a third of your health, 33% immediately. So if you're using Blast from the Past and like a shotgun loadout, for example, your health can get into the 2 millions very easily. So to get 667,000 of it back just like that is incredible. And it heals you over the next 30 seconds, which is amazing. It's actually really good healing. Like, it's faster than a couple of campfires. I think I said that in my old video, and I'll even reuse the old footage because it works. It's true. And I already did the editing, so that saves me a second. So there you go. 2 thumbs up for that. But it gives you good healing over the next 30 seconds. Sometimes I'll eat a coconut when I'm fully healed just because I know I'm going to take some damage, and that extra healing will help out. Not only does it heal you, but if you have Crossbones Barrett in support, technically speaking, coconuts don't give you a damage bonus. Crossbones Barrett does. So if you get coconuts from a teammate, they won't necessarily give you that damage bonus. But if you're running this solo and you're using your own coconuts, you're going to get that 16% from Barrett. And I mean, 16% extra damage is just great straight up. That's one of the best in the game. In fact, the highest damage perk normally is usually Rescue Trooper Ramirez at 17%. There are some edge cases I'll talk about later, but 16% is just under that in one of the best support perks. The other one that I recommend is a balancing perk. So there's like a few key things you want to balance in your loadouts. You want to manage your damage. You absolutely want to do a lot of damage. That's why we're sitting here with Sledge and Totally Rockin' Out. But then you also want to keep track of healing. Activating Totally Rockin' Out does heal you. I kind of showed that here. It's not a lot of health, but it does sort of keep you alive, and you need to be mindful of it. Coconuts, of course, takes care of that if you need it. And then finally, you need to sort of manage your ammo. I actually really like the idea of managing your ammo with Stars and Stripes. Jonesy, he increases your mag size significantly. So he gives you a 24% chance not to consume ammo, and that is really good because that applies to the ammo that isn't fired. How this works is if you shoot 100 rounds out of a weapon, on average, assuming perfect chances, 24 of that ammo will just not fire from your magazine. Like, you will fire the bullet, it will do damage, it just won't consume the ammo. So it's actually a cost-saving measure on top of increasing your mag size, because it increases the mag size by having the ammo still in there. So his perk will apply to the remaining 24%, and then the remaining, whatever it is, 18 or like 6 or so, and then the remaining 2. And because it keeps applying to itself, it's really more like a 31.7% mag size increase. It's a really, really good perk. I threw him in the lead one time with a quad mag size Mercurial MG, and I fired for 2 minutes straight. Super satisfying, very, very good hero in support. But The other king of support perks in that regard is Chaos Agent. If you are less interested in shooting for a long time and just want to reload quickly, Quick Fingers is awesome. This does trigger a reload event, so it will cut off Crackshot's ability, but reloading with a frag grenade is super fast, reloading with Shockwave is super fast, reloading with your War Cry is super fast. It's a really, really good support perk, really good for getting right back into the fight, and because you're reloading with your frag grenades or your Shockwave or your abilities in general, you can run a mag size perk on your weapon, and that will actually increase your overall damage output. Note, your weapon won't be doing any more damage, but because you won't be stopping to reload, your sustained damage over time versus a mini boss or a smasher or something will actually be a lot higher total damage output with Chaos Agent in support because you spend so much less time reloading. He's a really, really good hero, even if he doesn't seem like it. Now, I've already talked about Crackshot and Blast from the Past and a couple of recommended support perks. There are a ton of different directions you can go with this, so let's start off with some alternates. If you don't have the heroes that I already suggested, a big suggestion that I have that I always like to talk about is Locked and Reloaded. Skull Ranger Ramirez and Skull Ranger Jonesy are both kind of the exact same heroes, so it doesn't really matter which one you use, but basically when you reload, it ups your weapon damage by 15%. This is that tier list forming, by the way. I said Coconuts was really good at 16 because Rescue Trooper is 17, Skull Ranger is 15%. The missing piece of that puzzle is Ice Queen. She gives you a 14% damage bonus to frozen enemies. She's not really relevant to this build here, but I wanted to mention her in general just so that you have a more informed outlook of how good a support perk is, and 15% is middle of the pack. It's why I'm mentioning her as an alternate. You can absolutely use her. If you heard what I said about Chaos Agent and extra ammo and you don't really care, she's really good for just getting some more damage. It's only 5 seconds after a reload, but you're going to be reloading a lot in the game, so it's something worth knowing. But if you don't want to use her, let's talk about Light Show Spitfire. Light Show Spitfire is a hero that's very similar to Assault Ammo Recovery. He increases your mag size by 30%. And 30% is good, but what's great is the fact that he's a quest hero. Every single Save the World player gets Light Show Spitfire any time of the year. No voucher necessary. You don't have to research him. You don't have to play an event. He's available forever. However, there are a couple of caveats. One, 30% mag size increase is less than 31.7. I've checked like several times. And two, he doesn't care about a mag size perk. So if you're running a weapon like the Hacksaw, Terminator, whatever, that is a 100 round mag size getting boosted to 130. If you use a mag size perk, you go from 100 to 175%. With Light Show Spitfire, you're still only getting 30 extra bullets. If you use Assault Ammo Recovery, his perk takes place after the perks are on there. So your 175 round mag goes to be a lot more than 205. It actually respects the mag size perks and goes a lot further, which is why I always recommend Assault Ammo Recovery if you can get him. But I understand he's an event hero, so Light Show Spitfire will work completely fine if you want to use them. And I suppose I should mention, Assault Ammo Recovery is only ARs and SMGs. In the grand scheme of the big game, obviously Light Show Spitfire works on shotguns when Assault Ammo Recovery doesn't, but today's focus is ARs and SMGs, so Assault Ammo Recovery is as good as he is. Now, I mentioned that 20% bonus from earlier, and that's because of Extraterrestrial Rio. She is kind of one of the highest support perk damage perks in the game, but you can see the caveat is that it's energy damage only, and you need your shields to be above 50%. In Fortnite Save the World, you typically want to use the correct element. I have a whole video on that. I'll link it down below if you guys want to watch that before I continue with this video. You should, because it'll keep you informed, but I'll explain briefly real quick here that there's a basic trio of nature, fire, water. Water being good against fire, fire being good against nature, nature being good against water. So in Save the World, we typically have seasons. If it's an event like when I'm recording this video right now, this is going to date this recording, by the way, we have an ice storm in pretty much every single water mission, so it makes sense to use a nature weapon. They will do 100% of their damage to those ice enemies. During some parts of the year, we actually don't have any specific elements, so that will change from 4-player to 4-player. You should always check your mission's modifier so that you use the correct elements. Energy will get around that, though. Energy will do 75% of its damage to any element, so you never have to think about it. You will do more with a matching element, but if you want to be lazy, or if you're a new player who doesn't want to have multiple copies of weapons, energy will do just fine. And if you are using energy, you can make up for some of that missing damage by using Extraterrestrial Rio. Again, you need your shields to be above 50%, so no Blast from the Past, and no Playing Dangerous, because her bonus will go away, but 20% is a lot of extra damage, and it's something you should know about. Now, another support perk that I always like to recommend is Wukong. He is not the best in the game, that's why I'm mentioning him so late, but every 6 eliminations, you just trigger an explosion that does some extra damage. That can affect a large group of husks and really help you with some crowd clearing. It's not super amazing, but it's nice to have. If you haven't had a lot of the heroes that I've recommended so far, he can fill out your loadout and do some extra group damage. I actually use them myself sometimes. When I'm running a weapon like the pop shot, I know it's a shotgun and I'm not talking about shotguns today, but when I'm locked to a single target weapon like the pop shot, the thrasher, any SMG or AR for that matter, he can add some extra crowd clearing that was missing, and it's kind of nice to fill out the loadout. Now, I'm mentioning a hero you probably expected me to talk about super late in this video because I already talked about coconuts, I already talked about how good the healing is from that. Survivalist Jonesy exists. He is a super good early game hero. Lots of beginner players get him from base game llamas, regular mission alerts. He's super easy to acquire, and he does heal you when you eliminate enemies. The problem that I have with Survivalist is that he is almost on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to healing. It's only 39 base health over 3 seconds, which is like 13 base health every second, which is not that much. That does not scale to be a lot in the end game. If you're using Blast from the Past, he will typically not keep up. If you're a lower power level player, there's a lot more leeway. You might get away with Survivalist Jonesy just fine. And if you don't have any of the heroes I've mentioned, he is perfectly fine to slot in your build for some extra healing. I just want to make all that very clear when I recommend him because he is good. Honestly, if you just want some basic healing, you don't want to think about it, it's fine. But the kills don't stack. You're never going to heal faster than that 13 per second, and there are so many better options. Coconut's a lot better. Eating wafers with totally rocking out is a lot better. If you have neither of those, even throwing down a campfire is good. If you don't want to spend resources on traps, then okay, all right, you finally got me. Survivalist Jonesy comes in, he's good. There are weird hero exceptions, like Dennis is a thing. If he goes ahead and drops some burgers on the ground, they can give you a lot of health, but it's only an 8% chance, so Survivalist is a lot more consistent. I just try to be very careful because I see a lot of people using Survivalist forever and always, and I just want you guys to be careful because he's not really going to do the same thing in the end game that he does in Stonewood. He's going to fail you in the end, and I just want everybody to be aware of that. So with that being said, let me recommend one final support perk, Fleet. Yeah, if you are really running out of options, if you don't have anything to fill out this loadout, this YouTuber keeps talking about event heroes that you don't have, Fleetfoot Ken's great. He's super common, same thing as Survivalist. He'll increase your movement speed, and running faster is never a bad thing. It's just that he's not adding any damage. He's not healing you, he's not increasing your mag size, you're not reloading faster, he's not buffing your abilities in any way, you're just going a little quicker. And he's nice to have. I stopped using him because eventually you grow out of Fleetfoot Ken, but he's definitely a great way to cap off the build if you're just trying to fill things out. Now, I am going to revisit the very beginning disclaimer that I made where you do not need to use the heroes I mentioned today. I have not been focusing on abilities today at all. As mentioned, minigun is linked in the description down below. Shockwave and grenades aren't strong enough to really use a support perk for, but if you are working with a limited hero quantity, I encourage you to just scroll through your list of heroes, try to do your best to pick a hero that sounds good. You know, if you're scrolling through and you see something that might make sense, maybe you're one of those people that got the mythic Master Grenadier and she makes your frag radius a little bit bigger and that works for you, go ahead. You're not going to be punished too terribly. Even if you use a support perk that's doing nothing for you, the worst case scenario is that you just have a dead perk. You're still going to be fine. You'll just do a little less damage. The key thing in Save the World is that like you have a really strong commander and a solid team perk and it's activated. After that, it doesn't super matter what you run because you're going to be good from there. Even gadgets are pretty much just opinion. I run turrets and Adrenaline Rush forever. I have lots of friends that run Banner, helps when you respawn. Slow Field's super good versus mini bosses. Airstrike and proximity mines you can pretty much ignore. Supply drops are good if you're trying to farm. That's totally fine. And teleport will get you around the map, but it's a little weird to take advantage of that. So gadgets aren't that complicated, and it's pretty much preference. Okay, I think that's just about it. If you have any questions, comment down below. I do read my comments even years later. I will see them. Subscribe if you're new. If this helped you, I really appreciate it. Videos like this take a ton of work. That's why I waited almost 5 years to re-record this, and a subscription goes a long way. But what goes even further is clicking a recommended video. A couple of them are going to pop up at the end here. Thank you again for watching. See you guys in the next one, and have a good rest of your day. Melee weapons in Fortnite Save the World are some of the strongest weapons in the entire game. You can eliminate hordes of enemies, solo mini bosses, and do tons of damage so long as you have the right build. And that's basically what this video is about. You might be familiar with my old Best Ninja Loadouts video, and that is from 2019. And while it's not strictly outdated, there are some things that have changed, and so I've decided to re-record this video and give you a fresh take. And on top of that video being 3 years old, the recording that you're about to listen to after this intro was recorded about 3 months ago. I've been putting off this project for a while, so when the mood shifts in a second, you know why. It would be nice to have a new take on this because a lot has changed. Our power level has changed. Luna got nerfed but is still amazing. Totally Rockin' Out exists and is just not existent in this video, and I'm older, I'm wiser, and I wanted just to clarify a lot of the new stuff that has come to the game. For example, tons of new ninjas have been added to the game, but there aren't really a ton that seriously shook up the game, and I think that doesn't change much. That's why I put off this video, but I wanted to focus on a couple of those. So let's talk about what we're going to be discussing here. I'm going to be helping you build the quote-unquote best loadouts. Now, there is no one true best loadout. In fact, the trickiness with that is not necessarily the heroes, it's the weapons. There are weapons in the game, like here's a bugged weapon, I'll link to this video down below. Founder's Night Cleave, you can't get this anymore. 4x attack speed is not possible, but with this insane 0.18 attack speed plus Paleo Luna, your damage output is ludicrous. I will link to that video down below. It has its own video. This weapon is nuts. But in a more realistic scenario, you might be running a weapon like the Stormblade Crit Explosions, which that 6th perk did not exist when I recorded my other video either. Throw Whiteout Fiona in the lead with Totally Rockin' Out active, and you are exploding constantly. That out damages the Night Cleave. And we haven't even talked about the Storm King's Ravager, which you can see I run it in 3 different ways because it's that strong. I run it for physical, just for normal loadouts to take out smokescreen mini bosses, because they never have an element, so hot tip for you there. Or if I'm running Luna, triple attack speed is amazing because she buffs your damage based on attack speed. We'll get to all that later. If you're not running Luna, if you're just running Assassin Sarah on the lead, Deadly Blade Crash, you might want to crit build on your Ravager. So to backpedal a little bit here, calm down. What I'm talking about today is the formation of the best loadout. There is no one true answer. There are way too many options. For example, I'm going to continue on just by cutting out a couple of the heroes that I won't be talking about here. Lynx Cassandra and Stoneheart Farah are the 2 ninjas that buff ranged weapon damage to some extent. Every other ninja in the game, to my knowledge, you can correct me if I'm wrong, every ninja in the game either buffs melee damage or some form of ninja ability or speed or something simple like that. You know, Phoenix, Wildlife exists now. But these 2 have their own videos. So Lynx is super prominent in the Mythic Storm King, also didn't exist with my old video. That video will be linked down below. That also gets into hardware buffs. This extends into melee territory, but Guardian Bowl is a thing that exists and Tank Penny is a thing that exists. They both buff hardware damage. That's super useful in the Storm King fight. They're not ninjas though, so it's out of the scope of this. And Stoneheart Farah, again, she is her own world. She has her own video. Link to that down below if you guys want to buff bows. We're going to be talking mostly about melees, and not just melees, but really swords. Swords are the only really good melee type. There are edge cases for axes and scythes and everything in the game, but swords are really what we're going to be focusing on here today, and that's how I'm trying to dial this video in and make this as understandable as possible. So I have favorited some key picks here that will hopefully dial in this video. First and foremost, we're going to go right to left here. Whiteout Fiona. She buffs the crit rating of swords, axes, and scythes by 15. Crit rating and crit chance are not the same thing. I'm about to move a very white screen onto here, so if you're in a dark room, flashbang warning. This is a chart that I've been referring to for years. It basically shows that 15 crit rating is really 0.175 crit chance, and that's important for this reason right here. So her 15 crit rating is going to combine with whatever crit rating perk you have. So if I'm running the Storm King's Ravager, you need to add up the 15 crit rating from her and the 30 crit rating from the Ravager. So because of the way crit rating works, it's not like her 17.5% would make this a 60% crit chance. In fact, not at all. You'd have to combine her 15 plus the added 30 crit rating, so that would bring it all the way to 45. It would actually only buff it by 35.5% chance, which would bring it to a 50.5% crit chance on the Ravager. That is important to understand if you're going to be running Whiteout Fiona. It might not be that important though. I think it's important to understand it, but frankly, if you just put her in support, you'll crit more often. It only has to be as simple as that. And if you're going to be running Whiteout Fiona in support or even in the lead, you're going to want Deadly Blade Crash. Her damage output is insane. Basically, she makes it so that when you crit an enemy, it snares them and applies affliction damage, which is a huge percent. 37% of your damage dealt over 3 seconds is a lot. And in the lead, her damage actually is very, very close to Paleo Luna. It's not as scalable as Luna necessarily, and it does do damage once per second, every 3 seconds. So it's a little bit slower output, but it's very, very strong. And Deadly Blade Crash is a base game hero. You'll get her in regular missions all the time. It's super easy to obtain her. Same with Assassin Sarah. There's a bit of a clicking bug going on with the game. Sorry about that. Assassin Sarah buffs your damage by 90% in the lead after 5 stacks. So as long as you're laying into a single target or a crowd of enemies, she will constantly be buffing your damage. She is one of the classic commander perks. If you're running her in the lead, great. I don't recommend it because of Luna and her overpoweredness, but if you don't have Luna, then Assassin Sarah is a fantastic pick in the lead, and she's always a good pick in support. Again, whether or not her 22.5% in support is, going to be worth your time, whatever, you will be doing more damage. That's just the basic thing to understand. And Swordmaster Ken is someone that's not going to be super well represented in this video because of the fact that his perk is less than the ladies and only active in Shadow Stance. So 75% is not as impressive as our other picks. 25% in support is pretty good, but it requires Shadow Stance, which happens after you kill an enemy. That's one of the main ninja bonuses. It's not as universal because it's only swords, but we are focusing mainly on swords. So he's a good hero to keep in mind. Definitely good to have on hand, but not always something that makes it into my loadouts. And then finally, I've gone the opposite direction because the rest of this video is going to be about Luna. Paleo Luna adds 9% of your current health to your melee weapon damage. As I've been explaining throughout this video, that does scale beautifully with attack speed, and she's kind of a cheat in that way. I mentioned the way that crit rating works and how the other heroes work because there is a reason to have like a crit build weapon damage loadout. If you're not running Luna. Luna, the way her perk works is you just want to swing as fast as possible. That's why that derpy purple sword from earlier is the highest damage output sword with a Blast from the Past Luna build. And that is unreal to me. But let's just go to a loadout and kind of show how this all pairs together. All right, it's Editing Beast. Just to clarify some things before we start talking about loadouts. First and foremost, what I'm going to begin talking about is a Blast from the Past loadout. And then after that, we're going to transition to the Totally Rockin' Out section. But there are a lot of things to consider. So I'm going to be showing this list quite a few times in the video, and honestly not enough in my opinion, because what I've laid out here are basically the 5 main commanders that you want for melee builds in general, predominantly swords as mentioned. And then we have like my basic script that I kind of just left in here, but we also have the support perks. I'm going to talk about all of these in detail as we go along. This is almost like a Karate Kid kind of video where I'm not going to show you a specific build that works for everything because it doesn't exist, but I'm also going to talk about pretty much every single thing here one at a time so that by the time you get to the end of the video, you're like, oh wait, we're done. We have all the things we need to build our loadouts because I want to talk about the pillars of a build, which are basically optimal damage. You want to be doing as much damage as possible first and foremost. Unfortunately, enemies do try to kill you, so you want to balance that alongside healing. And if the build needs it, you'll need energy because some builds like the Ravager, lunging and attacking enemies, I'll show that clip again later, needs a lot of energy, and that's an extremely important thing to balance out alongside those other pillars. So all of these heroes are going to be what you need to build the optimal loadout depending on what weapon you are using. So what I also want to bring up a bit sooner is the best melees video. That goes over all of the, you're not going to believe this, best melees in Fortnite Save the World, and not every melee is exactly the same. I use the Ravager as reference a lot in this video because A, it has all of like the best perks that I want to show you, and B, it's like the best melee in the entire game, shocker, but there are a lot of really good melees in the game that require different loadouts, and part of that is needing different team perks. So I might flashbang you here. I prefer YouTube light mode. You can fight me, I'm sorry, but because I'm only talking about Blast from the Past and Totally Rockin' Out, I do want to mention that I'm going to link this video down below. I do have a whole video on all of the best team perks in the game. Unfortunately for new players who might not have Blast from the Past or Totally Rockin' Out, there are really only those 2 team perks for like really good melee builds. There are some other team perk options that might be good in the meantime, like Soaring Mantis or whatever. I'm going to link the best team perks video down below just so you can get all those different options and learn what you need to learn. I'm also going to link the yearly timeline down below because this is really, really good for obtaining certain heroes. And finally, I'm also going to link another Google Doc that my friend Matteo made. It basically lists every hero in the game because I didn't want to muddy up all the information in this video by showing you when each and every single hero comes out because I feel like there's already a lot of information to digest in this video and you're probably going to watch this multiple times if you're trying to learn Save the World. So the timeline will be down below. If you're trying to get Paleo Luna, because I bring her up a ton in this video, you can just check this and be like, oh, she comes out August 7th. So this will be a super useful resource and those links will be down there below if you guys want to learn more than what was mentioned in today's video. So Paleo Luna gets her damage from your health. So Blast from the Past is huge. You basically You don't need it for Luna. She's still a great support perk even without it, but even a commander perk, she's great without it, but you really want Blast from the Past to have as much health as possible. And then your support perks are pretty limited. Let me actually go to this section here. Isa is fantastic. She just makes you stronger. You take less damage. Armor is a universal perk, and especially with melees, when you are up in the fight, there might be acid pools. You might be getting hit from all angles. Very, very useful to have Saurian Hide. I typically have the descriptions off, but I feel like for this video it might be helpful. A lot of newer players are likely watching this, so then there aren't that many options. Saurian Fight is irrelevant in this video because we're buffing melee damage output by a lot, and it's really important to remember these things. So, the pillars of a good loadout have great damage output, optimal damage output, and sufficient healing. And I do use the word sufficient very specifically, meaning as long as you stay alive, you're good. You're good. And we'll talk about how to do that later on. And then the third one is kind of like the and why. When it comes to the vowels of the alphabet, A, E, I, O, and U, I had to pause the editing there because I forgot them. I'm sorry. It's been a while since I was in first grade, but then it's sometimes why. And that's what I'm talking about, where the third pillar is sometimes energy generation. And that's what I was going to bring up here is I'm using Saurian Vigor because in this specific loadout, I don't remember what weapon I was using, but it wasn't the Storm King's Ravager. The Storm King's Ravager has a lunging attack when you jump and right click, and it has a ranged attack when you're just on the ground. That takes a good amount of energy, and having Fossil Southian support is fantastic. So that 4 energy per second will keep that very, very active. Super good to have. But if you're using a sword of melee that doesn't need energy, he is completely wasted. And while Saurian Vigor in the current state of the game sucks, this 2.125% every 5 seconds is disastrous. It takes like 4 minutes to get you to full. It is a very, very bad perk, and the coconuts will underscore that later on. It's still something. It's still more useful than energy we're not using, so like I begrudgingly put it on here, but I'm not thrilled about it. Saurian Instinct is potentially even better. I mean, pop a smoke bomb or a kunai and you might heal yourself, but that's up to you. That's up to you. And then Saurian Might is completely useless because we're not using ranged weapon damage. So that's the basics for Blast from the Past. That's it. That's all of the team perk covered. From there, it's kind of your choice. So let's talk about Assassin Sarah because we've already brought her up. Great support perk. Depending on the weapon that you're using, like you might have seen earlier, my Ravager is triple attack speed with 1 crit damage perk. That is specifically spec'd to have anatomy lessons and support. She brings the crit chance up so much that I can even show you the weapon. If we go to the schematic that I'm sometimes using, you can see that is the wrong, see, I'm telling you, that clicking bug. It is 32.5%. That's pretty dang good for having all the attack speed needed for Luna's juicy damage output, and enough of a crit chance from support, Whiteout Fiona and support, that we can just have a crit damage perk on here. Some people opt to run maybe a damage perk instead of crit damage, and then you can have the Assassin Sarah in support, or even Ken. Both of those are pretty good options, but it's important to remember that the damage perk isn't that good, because when you're running triple attack speed on your melees, your damage output from that weapon is quite low. So in that instance, it doesn't really make sense to buff your melee weapon in any amount of damage, and I actually want to move on to my final perk down here just to underscore that. So I'm skipping Battle Beat because she just increases your attack speed, great for Luna, and your damage, which is great for in every use case. I'm going to go all the way down here to go in coconuts. So I have a chart here that has listed a bunch of different support perks. You don't need to pause for this, but I wanted to mention a few options. So I mentioned the core pillars of a good build is great damage output, good damage output, sufficient healing, and then energy if applicable. And I wanted to keep repeating that because Breakbeat Wildcat is great for support damage. She's awesome. Varsity Hero does the same thing. I can actually show him just to give the newbie players perhaps more information. Varsity Hero drops footballs that activate the Rock and Riff, which is basically the same thing as her, but you kind of have to run over the footballs. You're a little bit more exposed in the fight. I prefer Battle Beat because it just activates from the kills that you're trying to get anyway. It's a little bit more natural for me. And then there are perks related to healing. So Survivalist is one of the only soldiers that is actually really useful in, ninja loadouts, because Survivalist healing you is great. But Survivalist healing is really bad. It's really, really slow. And that is where you might want to consider something like Arlene Iza. She increases life leech basically based on how much health you're missing, and that life leech does scale with how much damage you're doing with your melee. So if you're running like a triple attack speed build like a Luna build, you might not want to run Monster Smash in the support. And that's why I wanted to talk about coconuts, because you might have noticed we have support perks, we have damage perks. Coconuts buff damage and healing. That is really, really strong. I've talked about coconuts in like every video ever because I have stated this many times and I will stand by it. I do believe, this is my opinion, it is the best support perk in the game because he universally buffs damage, melee. I'm pretty sure this buffs ability damage. It will make your minigun do more damage. It does. It increases your melee, your range weapon damage, everything. It's just great. It's just great. And it heals you by around 30% instantly. So if you have over 1 million health in your squad, you'll just give you 300k. It's that easy. And then it heals you over 30 seconds at a speed that is faster than 2 max perk campfires. It's way too powerful. And going further than that, we now have a utility slot. So you can use coconuts and 3 weapons, which is just fantastic. Really strong. Now, I brought up coconuts in this roundabout way to mention that if you're running a different loadout, perhaps you want to run a crit build on your melee and you don't want to go all attack speed like Luna, you might want to consider something like Deadly Blade Crash in the lead, or Assassin Sarah, or even Whiteout Fiona in the lead could be good. She'll make you crit very often. All of these are great options. If you're doing something like that, where you're speccing into a weapon that has like damage perks on it and not just attack speed, this could be a situation where you might want Monster Smash. Maybe you're somebody who really doesn't like hunting for coconuts. Trust me, I know how it feels. In fact, I've been using it less often lately just out of comfort because searching coconuts can be really bad. It can take a while. It's annoying. Slows the mission down. If you're speedrunning, it's not fun. So Monster Smash can actually heal you sufficiently if you're doing enough damage with your weapon. Now, that is where best perks come into play. I mean, they've been in play this whole time. I have best perks on like every melee. I should have linked this sooner, but I have a video on the best melees. Link to that down below. Pretty sure the description of that video is loaded with links to other melees as well. That would be a great resource because, like I've been saying throughout this video, your ninja loadout is sculpted kind of around and with the weapon you want to use. So that's where things can get very hairy, but I'm going to try to simplify as much as possible. And one more final mention before we move on to totally rocking out stuff is the edge case where if you're using axes, you might want Dennis Jr. So he has the Shredder team perk, or I'm sorry, the Shredder support perk. He actually activates the totally rocking out team perk. We'll get to that in a second. He basically makes it that axe eliminations make you, swing faster, do more damage. The same deal Rock and Riff is giving you with Battle Beats. So Totally Rocking Out is something I'm going to admit right now I am not an expert on. Totally Rocking Out has never been super favorable for me as a melee build because while you are outputting tons of damage, you can be fairly frail. In fact, in this loadout I've shown here, your only healing source is activating Totally Rocking Out, and it's not a ton of health and it's not super consistent. So in this build, because you're doing so much damage output, I threw this together, by the way. This is not a best build. If you're watching, you're listening to this right now, we can all smirk for those people who paused the video here and then left, because this is not exactly what I'd recommend necessarily. I just wanted to show that if you run Totally Rocking Out, you're going to be critting a lot. So it buffs your crit rating by a lot. Remember, as I explained earlier, crit rating by 160 is not as impressive as it sounds. In fact, because I have anatomy lessons in here, it's really 175. At its peak, it'll be giving you a nearly 59% crit chance, which is pretty damn good. That is a lot. That is a lot. You'll be critting probably 70% of the time with this build as is at full stack of Totally Rocking Out. And that's amazing. You'll be doing so much damage that you might want to just remove Assassin Sarah or something and put on Monster Smash. This will probably keep you in the fight. And this build can be very good. You might want to swap this around. Instead of Fumble, you might want Wafers. I don't necessarily love Wafers because going from that back to a melee is a little annoying, and because you're in the fight, killing the enemies right in front of you where they might be dropping footballs, you might just want to keep Fumble and Battle Beat as they are. That could work completely fine, but this build has a lot of variants. Saurian Claws gives you damage based on health, and you're not going to have nearly as much health in this build. In fact, it's quite a significant amount less. So Luna might not be perfect, but you can kind of work this to whatever you need to be. In fact, if being flimsy is not something you enjoy, a universal hero that works in every loadout is Bomb Suit Kyle, or Bomb Squad Kyle. So he just increases your armor by 22. He's basically like Iza, but 33% less, and works no matter what. So you don't need Blast from the Past, you'll just take less damage. It could be a really nice support perk to have. he is kind of in the face of what I said earlier, where your pillars are damage, healing, sufficient healing, and energy if applicable. In this build, you're not going to be able to get much energy at all. There's nothing in here generating energy. So if you are trying to get energy, there are heroes in the game like Fallen Love Ranger Jonesy, where he gives you energy for kills. Great hero, by the way. Available with the Valentine set. And that's where I don't want to recommend Bomb Squad Kyle, because while it's great to stay alive, you're going to lose a whole support perks. You're either losing out on energy or extra damage. You are giving up something in that spot, but when you're running a totally rockin' out build, you are doing way more damage. In fact, as I've been mentioning with triple attack speed with Paleo Luna, if you're running totally rockin' out, you kind of want triple crit damage, which is possible on the Storm King's Ravager. I keep showing the Ravager, by the way, because it's, well, the best melee in the game, and it has all the perks that are relevant to what I'm talking about. There are, as I mentioned with the best melees video, tons of options. Pretty much everything I have 130, not everything, but pretty much everything here can be viable with the right loadout. It's just that the Ravager is a really nice template to show all the different perks that can make these builds awesome. I just wanted to clarify that. It's not the only melee in the game, and I'm well aware of that. So triple crit damage is what you want if you're running a totally rockin' out build, because all that crit rating should come from your team perks. So yeah. Hopefully this wasn't wildly confusing. I'm certain it was, because something that I liked with my old video is, look at the state of this, okay? Coming back to this old video, look at how few ninjas there were. I have to scroll down to show all the ninjas in the game now. It used to be so simple. There used to be no totally rockin' out. There used to be none of this monster smash Iza giving you health on. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. In fact, I had to do, like I said, I had to write down all these notes just to formulate this video, because I haven't thought seriously about ninja loadouts in years, and I'm really hoping that this cleared everything up. I'm well aware that I didn't cover everything. There are lots of little edge cases. Like if you really like Dragon Slash or something, you can put Dragon Scorch in support and whatever, but I feel like that flies in the face of my focus, where if you're running Dragon Slash, it should have its own loadout. That's what the link in the description is for. You should be focusing on damage, sufficient healing, you know, just enough to keep alive. That's why coconuts are kind of insane. And from there, you should be very effective in your games. Thank you guys so much for watching. I, as of recording this, know how much editing I have ahead of me, and you know, I appreciate you guys making it to the end. I'm no grief if you have to rewatch this multiple times. This is a ton of information, especially for a new player. Comment down below if you have any questions. I'll see you guys next time, and yeah, take it easy. We're talking about farmers today, and oh, I'm sorry. That was still there from my shop videos. Let me get rid of my creator code. You know what? No, I'm just gonna leave it there for the whole video. So I was feeling a little hesitant about recording this video today because I wasn't entirely sure that it was necessary. I have an old video right here on screen of me covering some of the best Outlander loadouts in the game, and basically that was an addition to my series of all of the best loadouts for the different hero classes, you know, soldiers, ninjas, outlanders, and constructors. I inevitably never did a video on constructors because that's way too basic. Like, seriously, just pick what you need. If you need strong walls, then just load up the support. There's really, like, not that many complicated ways to set up constructors. And with Outlanders, it was kind of the same sort of thing where I took the approach to, you know, showing the best way to farm. And I thought that video was good. I still think it's good. I'm going to link it below. It's still public and everything. But Clip came to the game. She changed everything. Never mind the fact that it's been a year since I recorded that video. I'm older. I'm wiser. You know, I have lights behind me now and a face cam because people requested that heavily. I'm glad you guys, you know, like what you see. But I have a few more things to say. Right off the bat, I'm going to get some plugs out of the way. If you want just the field guide to all items in the entire game, obviously I'm going to link my how to get every item video in the description below. That is, to this day, a fantastic resource. It's older. Again, I am wiser now, but how to get every item in that game is still relevant. Also, running expeditions is a fantastic way to do that. If you guys just want like a quick little guide, I always thought I was going to make a video on expeditions and how to do them, but I'll tell you now. First and foremost, you want to do the bread box, the crafting supplies. This is what's going to get you like all of the regular stuff, the nuts and bolts, the rough ore, the fibrous herbs, all the things that you want. And nowadays, and this is going to lead on to my second point that I wanted to cover before we get started, is the trap. the trap packs. Medium is usually not worth your time, but it might be. You definitely want to do large. If you get the traps, you can recycle them to get 100% of the materials back. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention right off the bat. I'm glad that segue worked so well. If you farm a lot and you end up getting tons of materials, you can craft whatever trap you want in the entire game, and you can recycle it for full. Anti-air traps, for example, are going to cost me 7 nuts and bolts, 4 and 1, but if I go to recycle this, I will get everything back. I'll get all 1400, 800, and 200 quartz in the respective materials. And this is not a new trick. That was new a year ago when I mentioned it in my old video, but it's a fantastic trick to say that, right off the bat, here's how to get every item in the game, and using this trick for traps, you can crunch all of them down. Like, you'll see that my backpack is nearly full, but so is my storage of just tons of traps. Some were gifted, some were crafted by me, and I just can, downcraft any of these to get everything back. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about farming loadouts. I know I've already showed this right off the bat here, but this is not the best farming loadout. There is no best farming loadout. I mean, shocker, if you've seen my videos before, that will not be a surprise, but there are a few ways to go about farming, and there are like 3-ish primary ways you can do it. First and foremost is actually, I'm going to start with the pickaxe, and that's with Pathfinder Jess. You can just use her in the lead. I'll talk about the respective loadouts in a second, but for the categories, you got the pickaxe, and then anti-material charge, which is the punch. That's, that's what most people are thinking of. And then there's kind of a third one where there are a lot of different anti-material charge users in general, and a lot of people brought up 1-2 punch. I always thought 1-2 punch was kind of a cop-out because the way it works is that it reduces your heavy attack cost, the energy cost, based on, the last ability that you use. So if you have all of your supports filled up and this thing is active to 100%, if you phase dash, for example, your next punch will do 0 energy. And as far as I can tell, you're essentially complicating your farming by making it look free, by spending your energy on dashing, which doesn't seem efficient at all, and I don't really think that one didn't click with me. A lot of people recommended this. I got a few comments on this, and I'm really not convinced that this is a good way to go. But if you want to use 1-2 punch and make your farming free, then that is an option for you. I went with phase and confuse just to up my phase shift, and then my phased out was able to reduce the cooldown time, which was nice and all, and there wasn't really any energy regeneration. I had to use fuel for the fallen, which I didn't really show very well because I didn't kill any enemies, and that's kind of my point, is that when you're farming, not just trying to demonstrate for a video, you're not worried about enemies. You're running around punching rocks. You're running around punching cars. You're not focused on the enemies. You shouldn't have to be stopping to kill things, and that's why I'm kind of not on board with this. So let's move on to the one that I actually, believe it or not, had the most fun with. This has always felt like kind of a weird build, but Pathfinder Jess. So in the gameplay you're about to see more of, I was using this loadout where I had Archaeologist and Fossil Southie in support. This is just giving me the constant energy regeneration. You're going to hear about those two heroes a lot today because you need them in basically any anti-material charge based build. And then of course 100% we're using Clip. So she is definitely something we'll talk about later, but like literally a must-have. Her plus Southie plus Archaeologist are the 3 that you're going to need for any farming build. Your other 2 support slots are almost whatever you want, basically. Of course, you're going to have Blast from the Past active, but we'll get to all that in a second. She is just fantastic to have in support. However, she only affects the anti-material charge. So I'm running all this in support just so that with Pathfinder Jess, I can constantly punch because I'll have that 33% chance to get extra materials from Clip, and then I'm just punching as many trees as I possibly can. And I'm only still showing this loadout because I want to talk about going coconuts. I had like a phase shift thing in my gameplay, but as I'm talking about it now, coconuts were going to be better because A, it keeps you alive, that's nice and all, but it gives you a 16% extra damage, so it would make all of my pickaxe damage do more. But as you can see, I'm already 3-shotting most rocks and trees, and in a forest, holy crap, this was way more efficient than I thought it would be, because in a forest, everything breaks in about 3 shots, like I said. So you're just mowing through the entire thing, almost literally, just getting all of the wood, all of the planks, all of the twine, all of the adhesive resin. If you're breaking rocks, you're getting more rough ore and everything. Of course, you got to remember to use your anti-material charge so that you can get that 33% chance to get extra stuff. But while you're at it, just smack everything. And so Pathfinder Jess is like a really, really good hands-on approach, but a lot of people might not like the fact that you're not instantly breaking everything and you're not quite getting that 100% bonus. So let's skip over my Fossil Southie build and talk about Clip. I have officially switched sides. I was convinced that she is best in the lead, and I stand by that depending on what you're farming for, but let's talk about it. So her in the lead is kind of the same story as Archaeologist. A lot of people have compared Archaeologist to Fossil Southie in the way that Fossil Southie apparently got more punches off. I don't know if I did it wrong, but I was only able to punch 4 times in a row before my energy ran out. If you somehow don't know what he does, he gives you 12 energy per second in the lead, 4 energy per second in the support, and it's kind of tricky to use him in the lead because you need Blast from the Past active. So you can see to have him in the lead, I need to have kind of a dead perk with Saurian Might in my support. So it's kind of not my favorite thing to have Fossil Southie in the lead, but I found that he might actually be the best because with Clip in the lead, she performs basically like Archaeologist in the lead, where you get like more punches in a row, but that doesn't really make sense because Archaeologist will get 6 punches in a row and then you're out of energy and then you're regenerating slowly, and it wasn't really a good experience. So I found it to be most comfortable to actually run Fossil Southie in the lead because he was constantly regenerating energy. Obviously, you get less punches with spamming it, but you're not always spamming it. You know, you're running to the next rock, you're running to the next car, you're running to the next tree. There's going to be a little bit of downtime here and there, and he's giving you 12 energy per second. So it's about 3 seconds wait time to get your next punch back. And of course, you can stash up 100 energy to punch about 3 or 4 times in a row. So he is just go, 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 go. And as you can see, I actually don't have Clip in my support here. That was a mistake. I was just sort of setting these up for demonstration purposes. I do have a couple of phase shift things in here, which are nice to get around the map, and you can afford it with Fossil Southie in the lead. But I would say either put Pathfinder Jess in the support, just so that you can punch things if that comes to that with your pickaxe, or obviously you want Clip in support, or you can just have Phased Out or Phasing Infused. These just make you, you know, dash faster. It's nice to get around the map if you're farming. I think that makes sense. And while you are getting less of the resources that Clip gives you, you are getting more of the builds. So that's kind of one of the situations where I talked about how Clip might not actually be the best all the time. And this is sort of why I switched sides. She is really, really good for rough ore, planks, you know, nuts and bolts, literally anything extra that you get. She doesn't give you any extra wood, brick, or metal. And that's very important because I was farming rocks in a lot of my gameplay because I was low on brick from yesterday's farming session. I was down to under 1,000. So I was prioritizing rocks, which she's not giving me any more of. So it's actually kind of dumb for me to run her in the lead if I'm just trying to get a building material. And if I don't really need any more of the rough ore or oxidized powder or something, she's not that helpful. Not to mention, if you just run Southie in the lead, you're still going to get plenty of that stuff anyway. I mean, how have we been farming for the past several years? We've never needed Clip. She's just kind of nice to have. And nice to have, she definitely is. In fact, while I'm recording, I'm kind of sick of her not being in my support. This is how this loadout should look. This is just probably my personal favorite way to go. As I said, if you're specifically grinding for nuts and bolts, you know, any of the extra additional ingredients that she gives you, she is probably more bang for your buck in the lead. She's definitely more focused if you're just trying to get the most nuts and bolts kind of thing. But I think if you just play the numbers game and punch constantly with Southie, you'll end up with more of all of that stuff anyway. I knew I would forget. I left a note even before I recorded, but I got to the end without even mentioning a lot of people want me to run Long Arm of the Law with Clip. And I want to talk about, like, I've been recommended this so many times that I feel like it's worth bringing up in a video, that you don't want anti-material charge to be extended here because it's helpful. That is a nice thing to have, but to run Long Arm of the Law, you're going to lose Blast from the Past. And the whole reason, as I mentioned, that we use Blast from the Past is for Fossil Southie. You need that energy regeneration. Clip is already slow enough in the lead, and this will just slow her down even more. Unless you're willing to like throw a drone or put traps over an encampment or something, both of those are very sketchy, and the drone is very limited. I don't see a way to make that not very wonky or not very impractical. Long Arm of the Law is nice. It gives you more distance on your punch. That can be helpful, but it's going to slow you down so much that it's not really worth it. So that's kind of where I'm landing on this. Those are some of the best farming loadouts. I know, kind of snuck up on you how we're at the end already. But yeah, that's basically all there is to say. And that's kind of why I felt a little weird re-recording this video, because my video from forever ago is basically what I'm saying today. It's just the same loadouts I recommended a year ago, but hey, throw Clip in support. But I understand that a lot of you guys wanted me to update this video with the new information and really flesh out what Clip brings to the table. So to just summarize everything one more time for the end here, she is good in the lead if you need crafting ingredients, and she is really good in support. If you're running a build based around anti-material charge, around that punch, you're using Southie in the lead or Archaeologist in the lead, as I mentioned. I think Southie's better. If you're running one of those loadouts, you need her in support. It's kind of stupid, actually, to not have her in support because she's really easy to get from the quest line. Obviously, she's in the collection book, so you can grab her with a voucher. That's actually how I got her, just to make the video. I don't recommend doing that so long as you can get her from the quest line, but she is just fantastic to run the support, and I can't recommend not using her. But that's pretty much it, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. You know, feel free to use code Mista at your checkout. Normally, I'd head over to the item shop to show that, but we're doing things a little different today. You can become a channel member here if you guys want to support me on YouTube. I am trying to get partner on Twitch, so if you're watching this in the future, I might already be a partner, but, you know, feel free to follow me down there, hang out in the streams. We really have a good time over there. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day. And then